I watched the sun dip behind the Rocky Mountains as I sat alone at the dinner table, my fingers drumming absently against the oak surface. The amber glow of twilight filtered through the kitchen window of our Denver home. But I barely registered the beauty of another Colorado sunset. Vanessa was late coming home again. This was becoming a pattern. As a regional business director, I was used to long hours and late meetings myself, but Vanessa's excuses had grown oddly frequent. "Client dinner," she'd texted earlier. "Don't wait up." Yet there I was, poking at a reheated plate of stew and waiting up anyway, an uneasy feeling gnawing at my gut. I tried to shake it off. Vanessa and I had been married for 13 years. She was charismatic and sophisticated, always the star of any event we attended. I used to joke that people only remembered me as Vanessa's husband because her charm eclipsed everything. I was proud of her. We were the power couple among our friends, a successful businessman husband and accomplished wife active in philanthropy and social circles. From the outside, we seemed like we had it all, but lately something was off. I felt it in the small moments. The distracted smile when I talked about my day, the new perfume she wore that she hadn't mentioned buying, the way she guarded her phone, flinching subtly whenever a text came in at night. Little things, but they collected in my mind like dark clouds heralding a storm. That evening, the storm finally broke. I heard the garage door open and straightened in my chair, heart thumping. Vanessa stepped in moments later, her heels clicking on the tiled floor. She was dressed a little too elegantly for a client dinner, a form-fitting navy dress and her hair perfectly in place. She paused when she saw me at the table, surprise flickering in her dark eyes. "Oh, Mark, you're still up," she said lightly, flashing me one of her brilliant smiles. She walked over and kissed my cheek. Her lipstick left a faint scent of wine and something floral, not her usual scent. Up close, I noticed her makeup looked freshly reapplied, as if she had just touched it up before coming home. "Wanted to see you," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. I set my fork down, studying her. "How was the dinner?" "It was fine," she said breezily, moving past me to the counter. She slid her purse down from her shoulder, and I caught a glimpse of her phone screen lighting up as she pulled it out. Her hand quickly tilted it away from my view. "We discussed some new contracts, boring work stuff, you know." She wasn't meeting my eyes. Her tone was casual. Enough, but there was a tightness around her mouth. I nodded slowly. "You're home later than I expected. Everything all right?" Vanessa chuckled, a sound that tinkled like glass. "Oh, you know how clients can be after a few drinks. They kept me longer for another round of wine. I couldn't exactly refuse. Politics of business." She waved a hand dismissively and then stepped away, heading toward the hall. "Let me just change out of these heels. My feet are killing me." As she disappeared upstairs, I remained at the table, the stew now cold and congealed in its bowl. My appetite was gone anyway. My eyes drifted to her purse on the counter. She'd left it behind. Inside, her phone would likely hold the answers to the questions swirling in my mind, the questions I was afraid to ask her directly without proof. I stood up, tension coiling in my chest. Trust and guilt battled inside me. We never snooped through each other's things before. But trust had never felt like an open question until now. Quietly, I moved to the counter and opened her bag. Her phone was tucked just inside. I pressed the home button. To my surprise, the screen lit up without requiring her passcode. She must have unlocked it moments ago. A text notification still glowed on the screen, previewing part of a message. Tonight was amazing. Can't stop thinking of... The sender's name was just an initial. A. My pulse pounded in my ears. My hand trembled as I picked up the phone. I knew I shouldn't, but a force beyond reason compelled me. I tapped the message, opening the chat. A thread of texts filled the screen, and with each line I read, my world tilted further off its axis. You in that dress, absolutely stunning, counting the minutes until I can have you again. 3, wrote A earlier this evening. Patience, I'll see you soon. Same place, Vanessa had replied, followed by a heart emoji. That was before her so-called client dinner. Images were mixed in with the messages. My breath caught in my throat as I opened one photo. It showed my wife at what looked like a hotel bar, raising a glass of red wine, her eyes alight in a way I hadn't seen in years. She was smiling playfully at whoever was taking the photo. The next image was of her hand resting on a table, fingers intertwined with a man's hand that wasn't mine. On his wrist was a distinctive silver watch with a royal blue face. Not a watch I recognized. My hands felt cold and numb. I scrolled further up, heart hammering. There were days and nights of messages, snippets of intimate conversation, plans to meet, compliments and private jokes, references to encounters I knew nothing about. One text from last week stood out. I can't wait to wake up next to you again. Last night was incredible. A. My head swam. A hot, sickening wave of nausea built in my stomach. But even through the haze of hurt and anger, a shred of rationality kicked in. I needed to preserve this proof. With trembling fingers, I pulled out my own phone and snapped photos of the most incriminating texts and images on her screen. Each click of the camera felt surreal. Evidence, I thought bitterly. Evidence of the worst betrayal of my life. Bile rose in my throat. I couldn't read more, it was too much. I locked her phone and slid it back into the purse, my mind reeling. My worst fear was confirmed in pixelated text and images right in front of me. Vanessa, my wife, my partner of over a decade, was having an affair. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself as a wave of dizziness passed. It felt as if the solid ground of our beautiful home had dropped out from under me. Anger, pain, and disbelief warred within me. Upstairs, I heard the faint creak of floorboards. Vanessa moving around in our bedroom, perhaps oblivious to the bomb that had just detonated in my chest. I inhaled deeply, trying to think, but my thoughts were a storm. When had this started? Who was A? How could she do this to us? To me? A dozen images of our life together flashed in my mind. Her laughing across the dinner table on our last anniversary, her hand in mine during a hike in Estes Park. Quiet nights curled up on the couch watching movies. The way she'd whisper, "I love you," before we fell asleep. Had all of that been a lie? I needed answers. But more than that, I needed Deceit, to know with my own eyes what exactly was going on. The texts were damning, yet a stubborn part of me clung to the hope that there might be some other explanation. Perhaps a misunderstanding, some elaborate, awful prank. Deep down, I knew better. The casual intimacy in those messages was unmistakable. Still, the thought of confronting her right this second while I was teetering between fury and devastation felt dangerous. I was afraid I might explode and say or do something we'd both regret. I needed to get out of here, to clear my head and plan my next steps. My hand closed into a fist on the counter. I realized I still had my jacket on from work. Fine. Let her think I was going back out for a bit. I needed air. I needed to think. I snatched my car keys from the hook by the pantry and headed for the door to the garage. My movements felt oddly mechanical, as if I were watching someone else move my limbs from afar. "Mark?" I heard Vanessa call from upstairs just as I opened the door. I paused, my heart lurching. "Honey, where are you going?" Her voice carried a note of concern, or was it anxiety? I forced myself to reply, aiming for calm. "Just realized I need to check on something at the office," I said, surprised at how steady I managed to sound. "Don't wait up." There was a brief silence. I could picture her standing in the bedroom doorway, frowning. I rarely, if ever, went back to the office at night. Finally, she responded, "All right, everything okay?" Not by a long shot. "Yeah, everything's fine," I lied, my voice flat. I pulled open the door to the garage. "Go on to bed, I'll be a couple hours." I stepped into the garage and shut the door behind me before she could ask anything else. The moment I was alone in that dim, familiar space, the facade cracked. My chest heaved as I sucked in a ragged breath. I stood there between my Lexus and her Audi, hands braced on my knees, trying not to either scream or collapse. I don't know how long I stood there in the musty half-dark of the garage, trembling with adrenaline and anguish. A minute, 5, my mind was a whirl of images and possibilities. I pictured myself marching back inside, confronting Vanessa with her phone in hand, demanding an explanation right now. I imagined shouting, her crying, maybe a vicious fight. The blood roared in my ears at the thought. Part of me wanted that catharsis desperately, but another part of me held back. If I opened that door again, I wasn't sure I could control what came out of my mouth or what I might do. A primal scream built in my chest, but I clamped my jaw shut against it. Not yet. I forced myself to move. My hands fumbled to unlock my car. I slid into the driver's seat and just sat for a moment in the silence. The familiar scent of leather and the faint pine air freshener did nothing to soothe me. My reflection in the rearview mirror looked broken. Eyes shiny with held-back tears, face flushed. This was the face of a stranger, a man whose life had just cleaved in two. Before I could stop it, a ragged sob tore out of my throat. I slammed my palms against the steering wheel once, a sharp bark of pain and fury escaping me. "Damn it!" I yelled into the empty car, voice cracking. How could she do this? How could she? The woman who promised to love me forever, share those smiles, those touches with someone else. What did that man have that I didn't? Was it excitement, newness? Had I been neglectful, too buried in work? Or was it her? Had she simply grown bored of me, of our comfortable, stable life? A slurry of self-doubt flooded in. I'm not handsome enough, not fun enough, not enough, period. Maybe I deserved this, whispered a dark corner of my mind. Maybe I drove her to... I cut that line of thought off with a bitter shake of my head. No, no. Whatever my flaws, I did not deserve this. No one deserves this kind of betrayal. If she was unhappy, she could have talked to me. Suggested counseling, hell, even asked for a separation. But sneaking around, lying to my face night after night, that was a choice entirely her own. My breaths gradually steadied. I wiped my wet cheeks with a rough swipe and sniffed hard. "All right, let's think this through, Mark." I pulled out my phone with shaking fingers and opened the photo gallery. There they were, the pictures I'd taken of her text conversation, the image of her clinking wine glasses with some unseen companion, the entwined hands on the table, that silver watch with a blue face starkly visible on the man's wrist. A watch. I frowned, zooming in. Something about it tugged at my memory. Had I seen it before, possibly at some work function, a client meeting? The design was unique, maybe a limited edition brand one of my colleagues wore. Just an initial, but if it was someone we knew, who could it be? Aaron? Adam? Alec? My stomach turned. Alec Walker, a young manager in my company, ambitious, charismatic, always the first to laugh at the boss's jokes. I had introduced Vanessa to him at last year's holiday party. I remembered how he'd complimented her dress and how brightly she'd smiled. At the time, I thought nothing of it. She was always charming, and he was 10 years our junior and eager to impress. Could it be him? He did wear a silver Rolex, I recalled suddenly. Did it have a blue dial? I couldn't be sure, but my gut clenched at the possibility. Alec was known to be socially adept and hungry to climb the ladder. Cozying up to the boss's wife, though, that would be bold even for him. Bold or just depraved. The more I considered it, the more it made a twisted kind of sense. Alec often volunteered to coordinate events with the spouses. He'd been at a charity auction we attended a few months ago. I remember him dancing with Vanessa while I was stuck in a corner talking shop with a board member. And yes, as my mind replayed that scene, I could see in my memory the flash of a blue watch face on his wrist as he spun her gracefully on the dance floor. A surge of hatred flared in me. If it was Alec, he had looked me in the eye at company meetings and smiled, all while bedding my wife behind my back. The sheer duplicity of... It made my blood boil. I had to know for certain, and I had to be smart. Through the haze of hurt, my brain's analytical side, the side that made me a successful businessman, began to assert itself. Acting rashly could cost me dearly. I needed a plan, evidence, and a clear head. Vanessa and her lover had been careful enough to cover their tracks until now. If I tipped my hand too soon, they'd just go deeper underground and I might never get closure or justice. Justice. The word flashed in my mind coldly. Yes, I deserved justice for what they'd done. They thought they could make a fool of me. They thought I would stay oblivious while they laughed behind my back. A burning resolve took shape in the pit of my stomach. They are not going to get away with this. I started the car and backed out of the garage, needing motion to match the racing of my thoughts. As I drove aimlessly through the quiet streets of our neighborhood, I forced myself to outline steps, the way I would for a critical business negotiation or a high-stakes deal. Step 1. Get incontrovertible evidence. I already had some. The text messages were explicit, but images of them together in person would be stronger. If this went to divorce court, concrete proof could provide leverage. And if I wanted to confront them publicly, the more evidence, the better. A grim satisfaction accompanied that thought. Yes, part of me already hungered to expose them, to wipe the smug smiles off their faces with undeniable truth. Could I hire a private investigator? Possibly. Denver had plenty. A PI could trail Vanessa, catch meetings, take photos. But that might take time, and I wasn't feeling patient. Still, it was worth considering if my own efforts fell short. Step 2. Protect myself legally and financially. If this led to divorce, and how could it not? I needed to ensure I wasn't blindsided in court. I wanted to consult a lawyer, preferably discreetly without tipping off Vanessa by any sudden moves. I recalled my college friend Alan, who'd gone into family law. We weren't extremely close anymore, but we exchanged holiday cards. More importantly, I trusted him. Perhaps I could talk to him confidentially. Step 3. Decide on an end game. Did I simply want out of the marriage with my interests intact, or did I want payback? The white-hot pain in my chest told me the answer. I wanted them to hurt like I hurt, especially if A was who I suspected. Both of them had conspired in this betrayal. Both had taken what was mine and laughed about it over wine and pillow talk. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went pale. In the glow of the dashboard, my expression hardened. I wasn't a violent man by nature, and I wasn't about to do anything stupid like hiring goons to beat the guy up. No, I would use the weapons I knew how to wield: information, strategy, and the law. If I played this right, I could exact a far more devastating revenge than a simple punch or shouting match. Eventually, I found myself parked outside my office building downtown. The streets were almost empty at this late hour, the high-rises shimmering with a few scattered lights from cleaning crews. I often came here to think through tough problems. The familiarity of my workplace had a calming effect. I killed the engine and just sat there, phone in hand. It was close to midnight, but I typed out a text anyway. "Alan, do you have time to talk tomorrow? It's urgent." I didn't hit send yet. Instead, I saved it in drafts. It could wait until early morning to be sent at a more polite hour. My eyes drifted upward to the top floor of the building where my office was. Somewhere up there, likely on his own floor, was Alec's office too. If indeed it was him. I pictured confronting him right now, bursting into his office as if he'd actually be there. The mental image of his face cowering in shock was satisfying but premature. I forced myself to breathe slowly and lean back against the headrest. Focus. Control. You have that, Mark. It's gotten you through boardrooms and business crises. It will get you through this hell as well. Step 4. Set the trap. If Vanessa and Alec, I was nearly convinced now it was him, were as entangled as those messages suggested, they'd inevitably meet again. Perhaps soon. The text said same place. They likely had a routine, maybe a particular hotel or restaurant they frequented to avoid raising suspicion. If I could figure out where and when, I could catch them in person. Suddenly, a detail from the photo of Vanessa at the bar came to me. The background had a distinctive stained glass wall sconce. I knew that decor. The Brown Palace Hotel downtown had lights like that in its lounge. I'd taken Vanessa there for our 10th anniversary dinner. How poetic, I thought with a sour taste in my mouth. If that's where she now met him. If the Brown Palace was their regular spot, it shouldn't be hard to confirm. They might have a favorite night or time. The message, same place, implied both were familiar, comfortable there. Perhaps they met each week on a particular day under the guise of client dinners or work events. I clenched my teeth. If only I could remember Vanessa's calendar. Did she have a recurring excuse? A supposed book club or a volunteer meeting. There was that new networking group she mentioned joining 2 months ago. How often did that meet? Once a month? No, more frequently. Possibly bi-weekly on Wednesdays. Yes, she'd been out last Wednesday evening too, hadn't she? A cold, methodical anger pulsed through me. I could wait until next Wednesday and follow her. That was in less than a week. Alternatively, I could manufacture an opportunity sooner. What if I told her I had to leave town for a night or two for business? Would she jump at the chance to see him outside their usual pattern? The thought of tricking her like that stirred a grim spark of satisfaction inside me. I checked the time, nearly 12:30 a.m. I was exhausted, emotionally spent, but also filled with restless energy. Going home now felt unbearable. I couldn't lie in the bed we shared, not tonight. Instead, I decided I'd actually go up to my office, crash on the couch in my private conference room. It wouldn't be the first late night I slept there after all-nighters, though never under circumstances like these. Before leaving the car, I composed one more message, this one to Vanessa. Working very late, decided to sleep at the office, see you tomorrow evening. I hesitated only a second before hitting send. It was short and cool, but I hoped she'd buy that I was just overloaded at work. If she had any suspicion that I knew something, she might reply or call. She didn't. After a moment, my phone chimed with her text back. All right, hope everything's okay. I love you. I love you. I stared at those words, anger and hurt twisting in my gut. How casually she could still say that, lie to my face or screen with sweet sentiments as if nothing had happened. Was she worried? Was she even now texting him to say that I was out of the house? The idea made me nauseous again. I locked my phone without responding, got out of the car and walked into the quiet lobby of my building, nodding at the security guard on the night shift. He looked surprised to see me, but I just waved my key card and managed a thin smile. Late night, I muttered. He let me pass without question. Up in my office, I collapsed onto the couch. In the silence, the pain washed over me anew. I covered my face with my hands, lying there in the dark, and finally let the tears come in full. Hot, silent tears of heartbreak and rage that no one would witness but the walls of this empty office. Eventually, exhaustion overtook agony. My last conscious thought as I drifted into a fitful sleep was a promise I made to myself in the darkness. I will make them pay for this. Underscore, 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 underscore. The next morning, I awoke to the gray light of dawn filtering through the office blinds and a throbbing pain behind my eyes. For a moment I lay disoriented on the couch, hoping that maybe it had all been a nightmare, that I'd fallen asleep working late and dreamt the entire awful scenario. But the stiff ache in my neck and the crumpled dress shirt I'd worn yesterday were all too real, as was the memory of those text messages. A fresh wave of anger surged in me, clearing the fog of sleep. I sat up, groaning at the kink in my back, and checked my phone. No new messages from Vanessa beyond the perfunctory "love you" from the night before. No doubt she was wondering at my silence, but I didn't care. Let her wonder. It was still early, barely 6:30 a.m. I figured Alan would be up by 7 o'clock. He had young kids who usually got him awake before sunrise. I decided to shoot him that text now. Alan, I have a personal emergency and really need your advice ASAP. Can we talk today? He responded within minutes. Of course. Everything okay? Not really. I'll explain when we meet. We arranged to meet at his law office downtown at 11 o'clock. That gave me a few hours to kill. I used them productively, first grabbing a quick shower in the executive washroom down the hall, a benefit of being high up enough in the company to have such perks. As I scrubbed the stale feel of the night off me, I avoided thinking about Vanessa. I needed a clear head for the meeting. Afterward, dressed in a spare shirt I found in a desk drawer. Not my freshest look, but it would do. I sat at my desk and powered on my computer. Time to gather some financial intel. If she and Alec had been carrying on for months, chances were there were receipts. Literally. Hotel stays, dinners, gifts. Unless they paid cash for everything, which was unlikely for big purchases. We had a shared credit card for most household expenses and separate cards for personal use. But I handled most of the bills and online banking, so I had access to her statements as well. My jaw tightened as I logged into our Amex account. Immediately I spotted red flags. A charge at the Brown Palace Hotel 2 weeks ago, $380. That could be a dinner, or a night in a room, or both. Another from a boutique hotel in Boulder last month during a weekend I was away on a work trip. I remembered I had a conference in Chicago that weekend. The charge was for $620. That sounded like a room. I felt sick looking at it. There were others, lavish meals at restaurants we hadn't gone to together, a $200 charge at a day spa. I didn't recall her mentioning a spa day. Perhaps she'd treated him. And a very telling purchase at a jewelry store downtown for nearly $1,500 about 6 weeks ago. I hadn't received any expensive jewelry from her recently. My hands clenched into fists on the keyboard as I realized someone got a very nice gift that day, and it wasn't me. I printed out these statements, each page fueling my indignation. This was marital money she was squandering on her affair. Money from our joint account, which I filled with my salary for our life together. The gall of it left me seething. By the time 10:30 rolled around, I had a folder of printed evidence. The bank statements, the text message photos, everything. I left the office and headed to meet Alan. His firm was in a sleek high-rise with wide glass windows that overlooked the city. I'd barely stepped into the lobby when Alan emerged to greet me, having been alerted by the receptionist. He was a tall, lean man with sandy hair thinning at the crown, and he wore the sympathetic half-smile of someone who frequently dealt with messy personal dramas. "Mark," he said quietly, extending his hand. I shook it, grateful for the firm squeeze. "Thanks for seeing me on such short notice. Of course, you sounded urgent. Come on back." He led me to a small conference room adjacent to his office. As soon as the door closed, his professional demeanor softened into concern. "What's going on? You look, well, like you haven't slept." I let out a bitter chuckle. "That's about right." I took a seat, and for a moment words failed me. Saying it aloud would make it painfully real. I swallowed hard. "It's Vanessa. I found out she's been having an affair." Alan's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry." He pulled out a chair and sat across from me, his hands folded on the table. "Tell me what happened." Inhaling shakily, I recounted the essentials. Finding the texts on her phone, the evidence I'd gathered since. I tried to keep my voice even, factual, but a tremor snuck in when I described some of the messages. Alan listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, his expression grave. When I finished, I opened the folder and pushed copies of the text photos and financial statements toward him. I've compiled some proof here. He glanced over the materials, jaw tightening at a couple of the more explicit text lines. This is quite a lot of evidence already. He looked back up at me, lawyer mode engaged. All right, you came to me for advice. I assume you're considering divorce. Considering it? I gave a humorless laugh. That's a foregone conclusion. I'm not staying in a marriage with a cheater. Understood. He nodded. Colorado is a no-fault divorce state, so legally you don't have to prove adultery to get a divorce. However, evidence of her affair can still be relevant in certain ways. For instance, if marital funds were used to further the affair, the court can consider that in dividing property. I tapped the statements. She spent our money on him. Hotels, trips, jewelry. It's all right there. Alan pursed his lips. Yes, I see. Those expenditures could be argued as dissipated marital assets. Judges don't like seeing someone waste marital funds on an affair. It might influence the settlement in your favor. I want it all in my favor, I said coldly. I don't intend for her to get a dime more than necessary, and I hesitated, then continued. I want them to face consequences socially. I'm beyond angry, Alan. I don't just want to end it quietly and let her walk away as if nothing happened. Is that crazy? He studied me, choosing his words. It's not crazy to feel that way. You've been deeply hurt. Wanting some form of retribution is a natural reaction, but I have to advise you carefully here. There's the legal side and the personal side. Legally, we can ensure you're protected and not taken advantage of in the divorce. Personal vengeance, however, can sometimes backfire or complicate things if it spills into the legal process. I knew he was cautioning me not to do anything too rash. I ran a hand through my hair. Believe me, I'm not planning anything illegal or physically harmful if that's your concern. He gave a slight nod. Good. So let's focus. First, do you have an idea who the other man is? I strongly suspect, I said. Alec Walker, one of my managers at work. I haven't confirmed it. 100%, but the initial A and some clues point to him. Alan raised his eyebrows. That's messy. An employee of yours could have workplace repercussions. I know. My voice hardened. I'm his boss's boss. Once I have proof it's him, I'll make sure he's out. Not just out. I want his career in tatters like my marriage is. Alan frowned slightly. Mark, I understand the impulse. Just be careful to separate what you do as an employer from personal motives. Firing someone purely over a personal matter. I won't give him the chance to sue me if that's what you're warning, I interrupted. If I have to, I'll find legitimate cause. Believe me, I'm documenting everything. If he's been sneaking around on company time or dime, I'll find it. All right. He paused, then tapped the papers. Now, about Vanessa. How do you want to proceed? Do you want to confront her immediately and file for divorce? Or gather more evidence first? Possibly even use this knowledge to your advantage before filing. I took a deep breath. I'm not ready to confront her, not until I have everything lined up. Right now, she doesn't know I'm aware. That gives me the upper hand. I intend to keep it that way for a bit. Fair enough. Sometimes that's wise, especially if you suspect she might try to hide assets or evidence when confronted. I nodded. Exactly. I've already taken steps to secure financial records. I'll keep monitoring. If she suddenly tries to empty accounts or something, I'll see it. I might quietly move half of our joint savings into an account in my name alone just to be safe." Alan gave a half smile, spoken like a man who's watched a few crime thrillers. "But yes, protecting your assets is important. Just be careful doing anything overt until you actually file, so it doesn't look like you're causing undue hardship. Perhaps just remove her access to some lines of credit the day you file rather than now." "Understood." I leaned forward. I also had another thought. It might sound odd, but what about a post-nuptial agreement? Alan's eyes widened in surprise. "At this stage, you're already married, so a post-nuptial would require her voluntary agreement. And if you plan to divorce anyway..." "Here's what I'm thinking," I said, my voice low and earnest. "If I confront her with proof and act like I'm willing to reconcile or give her a second chance, purely as a ruse, I might convince her to sign a post-nuptial favoring me. Something that ensures if we do divorce later, she waives claims or accepts a minimal settlement. Perhaps on grounds of this infidelity." Alan stared at me for a moment, then let out a short breath. "That's a very strategic move. Devious, one might say. She'd have to be pretty desperate to agree." "She will be," I said, not flinching at the characterization. "I know Vanessa. She values her status, her social connections. The last thing she'll want is a public, ugly divorce where everyone finds out she cheated. If I pretend I might forgive her, she'll grab that lifeline. And then you'd pull it away. After everything's in place, yes." Saying it aloud felt cold, but also just. "I won't lie, Alan. I want to punish her and him. If I can essentially box her into a corner where divorcing her leaves her with next to nothing and a ruined reputation, I'll do it. She made her choices, now I'll make mine." Alan leaned back, evaluating me. "I've seen betrayed spouses who just collapse, and I've seen some who go scorched earth. You're aiming for the latter." "Is that wrong?" I asked quietly, searching his face. I half expected a lecture on taking the high road. But Alan didn't lecture. He slowly shook his head. "It's not my place to judge. My job is to help you navigate it legally. Ethically, persuading her to sign a post-nup under false pretenses is a gray area. If she found out and had a savvy lawyer, they might challenge it, claiming she was coerced or defrauded." "We'd make it airtight," I insisted. "She's not exactly going to have a clear head when I confront her. But I won't hold a gun to her head. I'll frame it as a sincere condition of reconciliation. If she signs willingly, it's valid." "All right, we can draft something," he said. "But you'll need to confront her to get that done." "When do you plan to do that?" "Soon," I replied. "Likely after I catch them together or get final confirmation it's him. I want to look into his eyes when I lay it out, and I want her to see that I know everything. The shock might make her compliant." Alan exhaled, rubbing his temples. "Just be careful with timing. The more drawn out the mind games, the more chance something goes awry. People slip up or someone tips her off. If she senses the trap, she could refuse to sign or even go on the offensive." I nodded. I realized that. I'm not going to drag it out longer than necessary. Maybe another week or two tops, just enough to gather what I need and set up the confrontation on my terms. He agreed to help prepare a draft post-nuptial agreement that essentially stated infidelity had occurred and that in event of divorce, She'd waive any claim to spousal support and take only a small, predetermined portion of assets. We discussed what might be considered fair enough that she'd sign if guilty and remorseful. Perhaps letting her keep her own jewelry, personal car, and a small bank account. But I'd keep the house, my retirement, majority of investments, etc. It was far less than she'd get otherwise after 13 years of marriage to a high earner like me. But guilt can be a powerful motivator. As we wrapped up, Alan put a hand on my shoulder. "Mark, I know this is business for me now, but also, as your friend, take care of yourself. This kind of stress, the anger, it can eat you alive if you're not careful." His concern was genuine, and it caused a tightness in my throat. I managed a thin smile. "I appreciate that. Really, I'll be okay. I have to be. You have my cell. Call me any time, day or night, if something blows up or if you just need to talk," he said. I nodded and we shook hands firmly. "Thanks, Alan." Walking out of that office, I felt more focused than I had since this nightmare began. I had a knowledgeable ally and a concrete plan forming. It didn't erase the pain. Nothing could, perhaps not for a long time. But it gave me a sense of purpose beyond wallowing in misery. As I stepped into the sharp Colorado sunlight outside, I allowed myself a moment to close my eyes and steel my resolve. A memory of my wedding day came unbidden. Vanessa, in her ivory gown, beaming at me with tears of joy in her eyes as we said our vows. "Till death do us part," she had whispered, squeezing my hands. A hollow ache opened in my chest at the thought. That woman felt like someone else entirely now, a ghost of a life that had vanished. "Till betrayal do us part" was more fitting for what we had become. I drew in a slow breath of cool late morning air and opened my eyes. Time to set the trap. Underscore, 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 underscore. The intervening days were a trial of patience and deceit. Vanessa behaved like a model wife, clearly determined to prove her devotion. She catered to me at every opportunity, cooking my favorite meals, leaving little notes of apology and affection around the house, even suggesting we start marriage counseling whenever I felt ready. I nodded and gave non-committal answers, all the while counting down the hours. At night, I still slept in the guest room, claiming I was suffering from insomnia and didn't want to disturb her. She never protested, likely grateful I was even under the same roof. If she suspected my true intentions, she gave no sign. In fact, she seemed almost pathetically grateful that I hadn't kicked her out or publicly shamed her. Little did she know. Meanwhile, I quietly set the final phase of my plan into motion. I contacted a select group of people, close friends of ours and some of her key social acquaintances, and invited them to an impromptu dinner gathering at our house for the upcoming Saturday evening. I painted it as a casual get-together, hinting that I had some personal news to share. The vagueness likely piqued their interest. Most accepted eagerly. I also somewhat audaciously invited Alec. This was perhaps the riskiest element. When I called him at work to extend the invitation, he was silent for a long moment. "You want me to come to dinner at your house?" he said flatly, clearly suspecting a trap. "Yes," I replied evenly. "We're having a few friends over. Considering everything, I think it would be good to show there are no hard feelings. We're all adults after all." He barked a short laugh. No hard feelings, are you serious? I could imagine the simmering anger on his face after Vanessa's call dumping him. He hadn't approached me or her, likely on my wife's orders not to contact, plus his own uncertain footing. At work, I had kept things strictly professional, as if nothing personal had occurred, but he knew the axe was about to fall. I'd already had HR quietly compile records of his recent expenses and performance reports. As serious as I can be, I said calmly. Look, Alec, what happened happened. Vanessa and I are working it out. I don't see a need to ruin your life over it. I practically heard his eyes narrowing in suspicion. Why the sudden benevolence? You made her call me and... He stopped himself. Perhaps he realized complaining to me about that wouldn't be wise. I pressed on, tone almost friendly. Everyone makes mistakes. I'm offering an olive branch here. Come to dinner, clear the air. It might actually do some good for all of us to just air things out and move forward. He was quiet, likely stunned. Then in a wary voice, all right, if you're sure. Absolutely, I said. Saturday at 7, see you then. When I hung up, a cold smile curved my lips. Hook-baited fish on the line. Saturday arrived, Vanessa, eager to please and perhaps happy that I was willing to host people again. A sign of normalcy returning in her view. Spent the day preparing an elaborate meal and tidying up the house. I played my part by helping set the table and acting like a man cautiously optimistic about the future. I even gave her a small warm smile at one point, saying, "Thank you for doing all this." She beamed, clearly starving for positive feedback. If all went according to plan, that smile would be wiped away by night's end. Our guests gathered in the early evening. Close friends like David and Marcia from next door, a couple of colleagues from my office, and two of Vanessa's dearest friends from her charity committee. It was a somewhat eclectic mix, but all had known us as a seemingly happy couple. They had no idea what developments had transpired behind closed doors. I greeted each guest warmly, making rounds with drinks. I could see a hint of curiosity in some eyes, perhaps expecting a pregnancy announcement or some big move, given my mysterious personal news tease. Vanessa, though nervous about what I might say, I'd kept even her in the dark, claiming I just wanted to thank everyone for support during our recent rough patch. Was in hostess mode, smiling graciously and making sure appetizers were flowing. When Alec arrived, the mood noticeably shifted. He walked in, stiff in the shoulders, offering a guarded smile that didn't reach his eyes. He was cordial enough, greeting others and thanking Vanessa for inviting him as she took his coat. But I caught the uneasy glances from our neighbors. They likely found it odd he was here at all. Alec wasn't part of our intimate circle. He was my subordinate, and aside from larger work functions, he'd never been a guest at our home socially. To break the tension, I made a point of clapping a hand on Alec's back and saying loudly, "I'm so glad you could make it, man." He flinched just slightly at my touch, but masked it. We looked, to any outsider, like pals. Vanessa remained a bit tense around him, but she followed my lead, engaging one of her friends in conversation to divert attention. Dinner was served buffet style, people milling about the dining and living room, balancing plates. I waited patiently, making small talk, even sharing a few laughs at trivial jokes. Inside, my heart thudded in anticipation and a slight dread. I would only get one shot at this reveal. It had to be delivered perfectly. At a suitable moment, dessert plates half empty, wine glasses topped off, I cleared my throat and raised my glass for a toast. Everyone, can I have your attention for a moment? Conversations died down and heads turned toward me. Vanessa stood by my side, looking curious and a touch anxious. Alec was leaning against the far wall, arms loosely crossed, watching me intently. I smiled around at our friends. First, I want to thank you all for coming on short notice. It means a lot to have you here. Our closest friends, colleagues, and I nodded toward Vanessa's two committee friends. Practically family in some cases. We've known most of you for years, shared a lot of good times. There were warm smiles and a few murmurs of agreement. Vanessa relaxed slightly, thinking perhaps this was going to be a positive, heartfelt speech. I continued, "You might be wondering why I called you all together. Truth is, Vanessa and I have been through a bit of a rough patch recently." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Vanessa stiffen. This was not what she expected me to say in public. A ripple of concern went through the guests. Worried looks, a furrowed brow from David next door. Alec's posture straightened, sensing something coming. I put on a somber, earnest face. Marriage isn't always easy, as I'm sure you all know. We've had our challenges, especially in the past few months. Vanessa interjected softly. "Mark, you don't have to." I held up a hand gently to hush her. "No, it's all right. I want to be honest with our friends. Honesty is so important, don't you think?" My gaze swept the room and landed on Alec deliberately as I said that last line. He narrowed his eyes. A few nods from around the room, though people looked a bit uncertain. "Recently," I went on, "I discovered something painful, a betrayal." I let the word hang, then added quietly, "My wife, Vanessa, has been having an affair." A collective gasp sounded. Marcia's hand flew to her mouth. The charity friends exchanged stunned glances. I felt Vanessa grab my forearm tightly as if to physically stop me from saying more. Her face had gone utterly pale. "Mark," she hissed, mortification and panic in her eyes. I gently pried her fingers off my arm and stepped forward away from her. "No, I need to say this, Nessa." Using her nickname in that moment made her flinch. I turned my attention back to the group. Vanessa remained a bit behind me, trembling. "It's a hard thing to admit," I said, affecting a broken tone, "but I think it's best if the truth is out in the open. No more secrets." All eyes were now ping-ponging between my wife and me, and a few darting to Alec, some perhaps connecting dots given his presence. He looked as if he wished to sink into the floor. My neighbor David cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. Mark, are you sure you want to?" I pressed on, voice rising. "The affair was with a man we all know, a man I considered a friend." I gave a tight smile, or at least a valued colleague. Now everyone knew. Several sets of eyes swung to Alec, who pushed off the wall, face reddening. One of Vanessa's friends, a sharp-featured woman named Colleen, actually gasped, "Oh my God," and put a hand on Vanessa's shoulder. Vanessa hung her head, tears forming, but too ashamed to meet anyone's gaze. Alec finally found his voice. "All right, Mark, that's enough," he said, trying for a chuckle as if to play it off. "You've made your point." I ignored him, addressing the room. For over 6 months behind my back, Vanessa and Alec carried on their tryst. They lied to all of us, used our gatherings, our events as opportunities. Alec stepped forward, anger flashing in his eyes. "This isn't the place, isn't it?" I snapped, rounding on him. Why not? Feeling uncomfortable, Alec, and afraid of a little public scrutiny? You weren't so shy sneaking around in five-star hotels on my dime, no less. Mutters of disapproval and shock rippled through the group. One colleague of mine looked at Alec with pure disgust. Alec's composure cracked. This is between us, not them. I laughed sharply. You made it between us the moment you slept with my wife, you arrogant son of a bitch. He bristled, and for a second I thought he might lunge at me. But then he caught himself, glancing at the astounded audience. He attempted to salvage some dignity, straightening his jacket. Yes, fine, it happened. We're all human. Vanessa and I made a mistake. Mistake? I echoed, voice dripping with sarcasm. A mistake is tripping on a curb, Alec. A 6-month campaign of deception is a bit more than that. Vanessa finally spoke, voice quavering and thick with tears. Please, please stop. She reached a beseeching hand toward me. Her friends hovered around her, one glaring at Alec. I wasn't done. The final nail awaited. I pulled my phone from my pocket. Earlier that day, I had created a group text with everyone present. All their numbers gathered from my contacts. In it, I'd attached 2 files. One of the photos of Vanessa and Alec at the hotel and one screenshot of a salacious text exchange between them. My finger hovered over the send button. You all don't have to take my word for it, I said with a cold smile. I've collected plenty of evidence. And with that, I hit send. A chorus of chimes and buzzes went off as phones around that room received the message. Immediately, people started checking their screens, gasping or exclaiming in shock. Colleen, still by Vanessa's side, recoiled with a look of horror as she saw what presumably was a picture of Alec's hand on Vanessa's bare thigh under a restaurant table. One of the tamer but damning images I'd chosen. Oh, Vanessa, how could you? She whispered, hurt and scandalized. My colleague Sam looked at me wide-eyed, then at Alec. Jesus, man. The room erupted into low murmurs and exclamations. David stepped protectively toward Marcia, as if shielding her from the ugliness. Marcia just kept saying, I can't believe this. Alec had gone pale. Mark, that was completely unnecessary, he barked, trying to save face. You're intent on humiliating us, is that it? I turned on him, my temper no longer feigned. It was real and towering. Damn right, that's it. Consider it the consequence of your own actions. If you two wanted to act like betraying deceitful rats, you can live with the shame of it out in the open. Vanessa sobbed openly now, covering her face with both hands. The sound was pitiful, but I hardened my heart against it. She sank to her knees, Colleen trying to comfort her, but also clearly horrified by what her friend had done. I looked down at my wife, the woman I had once worshipped, now collapsed in tears and disgrace on our living room rug. The satisfaction I'd expected to feel was there, but there was also a hollow ache. It was tragic in a way, but it was of her own making. Straightening up, I addressed the group once more, voice clear and formal now. I'm filing for divorce first thing Monday. Vanessa and I will no longer be together. Vanessa wailed softly at that, but I continued relentlessly. As for you, Alec. I faced him. He met my gaze with a mix of anger and fear. Your personal betrayal is one thing, but you also violated workplace ethics, misused company expenses for your affair. His eyes widened. He hadn't realized I knew about that. You're fired, I said bluntly. Gasps from a couple colleagues who hadn't known of the affair turned into stunned silence at this turn. Effective immediately. We'll discuss the details with HR on Monday, but consider this your formal notice. Alex's face contorted. You can't do that, he spat, though it was clear he knew I could, and had all the cause I needed. I stepped closer to him, lowering my voice to a deadly calm that only he and perhaps a few nearest guests could hear. Try and stop me. You have no one to blame but yourself. You climbed into bed with my wife. Did you really think there'd be no fallout? We locked eyes for a long, charged moment. I saw the realization in his face that he was utterly beaten. In front of everyone, his career up in smoke, his reputation in tatters, there was nothing left of the suave, ambitious charmer. In a strangled voice, he said, "You're a vindictive bastard." I gave a slight nod. When sufficiently provoked, absolutely. Alex scanned the room, the faces of people he had at one time perhaps hoped to impress. Now they looked at him as if he were something stuck to the bottom of a shoe. With a snarl of frustration, he turned and stalked toward the door. "Get out," I hissed after him, though he was already doing so. He paused only to snatch his coat from the entryway hook, and then he was gone, slamming the door behind him. A thick silence followed. All that could be heard was Vanessa's ragged crying. I felt all eyes on me, some shocked, some sympathetic, some judgmental. I lifted my chin, trying to steady my breathing. "I'm sorry to unload this on you all," I said, not sounding very sorry at all. "But I felt you deserved to know the truth. The people we think we know can hide the cruelest secrets." No one replied. One by one, our friends began making polite, awkward excuses to leave. What else could they do? This had turned into a train wreck of an evening. They offered half-hearted pats on my shoulder or murmurings like, "Take care, let us know if you need anything," which I answered with tight nods. A couple of them did lean down to murmur to Vanessa. Something like, "I'm so sorry," or "Why, Vanessa?" She could barely respond, just shaking her head in misery. Within minutes, the only ones left were me and my wife, surrounded by the detritus of what was supposed to be a friendly dinner. Half-eaten cake, wine glasses, and the unbearable tension that still hung in the air like smoke. Vanessa remained on the floor, hunched and weeping softly. I walked over and stood above her. I expected to feel triumphant seeing her like this. Part of me did, but another part felt an emptiness yawning inside. She sensed me and reached out, grasping weakly at my pant leg. "Mark, please." I stepped back out of her reach. There wasn't a shred of pity left in me at this point. "Don't," I said sharply. She looked up, makeup smeared, eyes swollen. You promised," she moaned. "You said you'd try." A flare of anger lit inside me again. "No, I promised I'd make you pay." My voice was ice. "Did you really think I could ever forgive what you did? That I'd just forget and play happy husband while you made a fool of me?" She shook her head desperately. I thought that we were healing. I would have done anything for you, Mark, and I did. God, I signed that stupid agreement. I humiliated myself for you. And now you'll live with the consequences," I interrupted. I went to the sideboard where earlier that day I'd placed a thin stack of documents from Alan's office. Retrieving them, I approached and dropped them on the coffee table in front of her. "Here are the divorce papers I've already signed. You can sign them whenever you're lucid enough. or get a lawyer to look at them. I don't care. The terms are as we agreed in the postnup, which, by the way, you signed, remember? She stared at the papers, then up at me, realization dawning through her haze of despair. This was your plan all along. I gave a single nod. Every step. Her face crumpled anew. How could you be so cruel? She whispered. I know I hurt you, but this is monstrous. Monstrous, I repeated, an edge of hysteria in my own voice. You think I'm monstrous? I crouched down so I could look her in the eye on the floor. What do you call cheating on someone who loves you without them suspecting a thing? Smiling in your husband's face while you crawl into another man's bed? Is that not monstrous betrayal? She closed her eyes, tears leaking out. I know I deserve to lose you, but not like this, not publicly. I stood again, looking down at her with a mixture of anger and a faint twinge of sadness. I gave you what you gave me, humiliation. The difference is you brought it on yourself through deceit. I merely exposed the truth. She nodded weakly, as if she couldn't argue that point. We were both quiet for a long moment. Finally, I spoke, exhausted. I'll be staying at a hotel for the next few days. When I return, I expect you gone. Go stay with a friend or whatever you need to do. We'll communicate through lawyers from here on. Vanessa didn't respond, just curled in on herself, sobbing softly. There was nothing left to say. I headed to the door, grabbing my coat and keys. As I opened it, I paused, a final thought coming to me without invitation. By the way, I said tonelessly, not looking back at her, I meant the vows I made to you on our wedding day. It's a shame you didn't. With that, I walked out, shutting the door on her anguished cries. Underscore, 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 underscore. Epilogue. A week later, I stood in what used to be our master bedroom, packing the last of Vanessa's belongings into a box. She had come and collected most of her things while I made myself scarce. The house was mercifully quiet now. No trace of her remaining except faint echoes and memories I suspected would haunt these walls for a while. Our divorce was already underway, swift and uncontested thanks to the paperwork she'd signed. She didn't even bother to fight it. In a terse email through her attorney, she agreed to the terms. She had no leverage anyway. True to my word, she'd get almost nothing beyond her car, clothes, and a small bank account we'd agreed on. Word of the scandal spread quickly among our social circle. The very friends who once idolized Vanessa now kept their distance, unsure what to say. Some expressed sympathy to me privately, while others simply stepped back, not wanting to take sides in something so messy. But in truth, most sided with me. The evidence of her infidelity was undeniable, and my orchestrated exposure, while shocking, secretly thrilled the gossip mill. At work, Alex's termination was swift and clinical. He didn't even show up to contest it, simply had HR forward his belongings. Rumor had it he left town to pursue opportunities elsewhere. More likely he couldn't face the whispers and bridges burned here. Good riddance. Standing in the half-empty bedroom, I was struck by the hollowness of it all. I had won, unquestionably. I had orchestrated a revenge so complete that neither my wife nor her lover would ever fully recover their previous lives or reputations. By any measure, I had come out on top. Assets intact, dignity mostly restored, and those who wronged me publicly shamed. So why did the victory taste so bitter? I carried the box of Vanessa's last possessions downstairs. On top lay our wedding album, a glossy reminder of promises broken. I paused, then set the album aside. No need to send that with her. She likely wouldn't want it, and I certainly had no use for it anymore. Instead, I opened it myself one last time. There we were on page after page, smiling, cutting the cake, dancing our first dance. My eyes lingered on a photo of us laughing together as the guests blew bubbles around. We looked so happy, so genuine. I felt like I was staring at strangers. With a sigh, I closed the album and placed it on a shelf. Perhaps I'd throw it out later. Or maybe keep it as a reminder to never be that naive man again. I took the box to the entryway. Her friend Colleen was due to pick it up for her this afternoon. I suspected Vanessa herself was too ashamed to ever step foot here again. Or maybe she simply couldn't bear to face me. Either way was fine. Before sealing the box, my eyes fell on one item I hadn't noticed inside. The bronze figurine from Santa Fe, the one I'd used as a paperweight for the evidence during our confrontation. It was a small sculpture of two interlocking shapes, abstract and meant to symbolize a couple in embrace. It had been a gift from me to her on our 5th anniversary. I picked it up, feeling its weight. How ironically I'd used it. With a grim smile, I walked to the garbage bin and dropped the figurine in. Outside, a car door slammed, likely Colleen arriving. I prepared to hand off the box and with it the last physical ties to my marriage. As I opened the door, the crisp Colorado air filled my lungs. It was a bright day, sun reflecting off the light dusting of snow from the night before. Colleen gave me a tentative nod and took the box with minimal conversation. I didn't mind. After she drove off, I remained on the porch for a moment, gazing out at the Rocky Mountain foothills on the horizon. The world felt strangely quiet. I realized belatedly that the knot of tension I'd carried in my chest since the day I found those texts had eased. The rage that had kept me going, the consuming focus on vengeance, had burned itself out. What remained was a weary relief. It was over. I could breathe again, free of lies and doubt. Stepping back inside, I closed the door of the house, my house now, and stood in the silence. There would be difficult days ahead, I knew. Moments of loneliness, maybe regrets that would sting unexpectedly. But I also knew I'd chosen this path because I had to reclaim my self-respect and sense of justice. In that, I felt no regret. As I moved through the living room, tidying up the remnants of the past week's chaos, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror above the mantel. There I was, Mark, a little gaunter, a little harder around the eyes perhaps, but intact, still standing. I gave my reflection a faint nod. "You made it," I murmured. And in the quiet of that late afternoon, I allowed myself a small, true smile. My first in a long, long time. I had won.